Hello. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, hi, everybody. This is Rachel Abrahams. I'm a program officer at AVI CHAI. We're glad that some of you have joined us today. We're just going to wait a minute or two as more people are logging on, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to get ready to start. I just want to welcome everyone. Again, I'm Rachel Abrahams. I'm a program officer here at AVI CHAI. I want to just remind everyone that on the page that you're watching from, there's a question box on the bottom. You can submit your questions as I'm speaking, as we're showing the slides. And then we have someone watching with me, sort of looking through the questions, and they'll be putting them up for me, and I'll probably answer them at the end after I finish my presentation. And then if we don't get to something, you can always follow up with us afterwards, okay? So just use that question box as you wish during the presentation, and we'll be back to those questions at the end. Okay, so I just want to introduce myself a little bit. I've been here at AVI CHAI for about 18 years. For the last 4 years at AVI CHAI, my work has been devoted to online and blended learning. We have a team of people at AVI CHAI that are working in this area. I work along with Eli Kanai, our senior educational technologist based in Israel, Gali Eisenman, who's here with me at AVI CHAI, and then obviously other people from the foundation support us as we do different pieces of our work. Deborah Fishman, who you've gotten your emails from, has supported all our communications pieces. She's helping me out today, so thank you. We've really enjoyed our work for the last 4 years. We think we're learning a lot. We are really doing this work kind of as research and development work while getting the schools and supporting schools in the field to implement. Part of our goal of entering this arena is really to provide knowledge to the field before we close at the end of 2019. And so the webinar today and the reports that we've published are really a part of that plan to share with you the things that we are learning as we work in the field. When we started this work about 4 years ago, we really went into the field of online and blended learning with two goals in mind. One was an educational goal, right, to improve the quality of education in day schools, particularly through the area of personalized instruction, data-driven knowledge about each student that would then lead to individualized differentiated instruction, and also encouraging schools to think about 21st century learning and skills that are needed as we change the way that students need to be ready for learning at higher levels. The second piece of the work was really to test some premises around the area of cost savings to see whether online and blended learning could reduce costs in schools, and thereby perhaps leading to reduction in tuition. We'll talk about both of those today. The reports also deal with both areas. And I think we could say kind of overall that we are beginning to see evidence that the educational goals are being met, at least as perceived by school leaders. Cost savings is a slower process. I think we are learning a lot, but I don't think we have evidence yet that cost savings is happening. I just want to say that, you know, we're extremely proud of all the schools that are engaging in this work, either through AVI CHAI funding or even without our support. This is tough work. It's trying to shift the nature of education, the roles of teachers, what classrooms look like, and that's slow going. So I think, you know, this is really kind of an interim report to the field on what we've been seeing so far, and we hope that in the next 4 years we'll be publishing much more as the work moves along. So let's get started with the data from the reports themselves. In the last 2 months, we've released 2 reports. I hope either you've read them or at least glanced through them already. If not, hopefully this webinar will be a prompt for you to look at them after we're gone. They're in the Knowledge Center area of our website and they're downloadable. So we encourage you to read them and to share them with your professional staff and lay leadership. The 2 reports, one more quantitative, written by Anne Deeter, a researcher that we've used for various projects here at AVI CHAI. It's a state of the field survey conducted over the 13-14 school year, published here in 2015. It's an update of a report that we published in 2012. 550 schools received that survey, 334 schools responded, which amounts to a 60.7% response rate. Many of the schools that responded in 2012 also responded in 2014, about 50% of them. We can't really say for sure that the same person in each school responded, but overall, looking at the responses as a group, Anne believes that we can learn from that set of schools that responded both times. The second report, that's actually on the left here, called Moving Forward, is a report by Dr. Santee Siskin, who's a professor at NYU, who's been working with us for the last 3 years to review projects that AVI CHAI is supporting in this area. It's an analysis of where schools are at after the period of time since the beginning of our work with them. She's looked at the new schools that we're supporting and also schools that are involved in the Digital J Learning Project Network. So all the findings that we're going to talk about come out of these 2 reports. So first, a little bit of background from the Deeter report in 2012. In 2012, we saw that 23.4% of responded schools talked about using some type of online and blended learning. You can see that in the early adopters and new adopters section on this slide. Many more people were kind of pending or undecided, and it was really the beginning of this work, and the data represented that. I think what we'll see as we go forward is that that has changed quite drastically in the 2 years since we did the first survey. Now in 2014, 79% of schools report using some type of online and blended learning. Those are the three kind of green sections in the circle below. Only 21% say that there's no online or blended learning going on at this time. So I want to talk for a little bit about what it means to be talking about some type of online and blended learning, because I think that's a part of the report that's richer than just looking at a statistic. I think AVI CHAI has learned, as I think the schools involved in the work have learned as well, that blended learning kind of happens on a continuum. There are different elements of the work, and some move faster and some move slower, and some are more important to certain schools and some are less important to certain schools. Schools go into this for various reasons. Schools realize that certain pieces of the work are harder to do or easier to move quicker. And so it's important to kind of think about that in terms of the field, but also in terms of your own individual institutions. The 79% of schools that report using some type of online or blended learning can be doing it in very different ways. It can be around the edges, sort of supplemental. It can be doing it, intermittently. Really, if we look back at that slide, it said that 21% of Jewish day schools have moved beyond sort of online lessons and supplemental online enrichment to deliver what we call hybrid courses, blended courses, or flipped classrooms, or fully online courses. And that's sort of the group that is most ahead, I guess, the most adopters so far. And even that doesn't say exactly, again, how many times a week and what it exactly looks like. This is kind of very overall high-level data. And I think we know this also from our work. We have schools that have been involved in digital J-learning or in a Torah Masorah cohort or are taking schools through the Lookstein Virtual Academy. And those are still pockets of activity within institutions. And that's great, and that's the beginning of that work. There are far fewer schools that have made kind of whole school change, right? The schools that are involved in either full day schools or schools that are new and opened with this model kind of are implementing this work across all their classrooms on a very regular basis. And so there's a very large range of what this 79% represents. And we think that's okay. And we think it is a continuum. Schools are moving along that continuum. Schools need help to move along the continuum. And we can go back to that wheel and kind of look at some of the pieces of the different elements that Leslie Siskin in her report highlights as parts of what blended looks like. So she talks about the variety of instructional modes, right? That instruction is happening in different ways. Some via the teacher, some via software, some in small groups, some whole group instruction. That is one element of blended learning, right? Another element, increased content opportunities. Again, the notion that the one textbook that we used to use and move through in a fairly standardized way is changing, and content is coming from various sources. Even perhaps more than one software provider in many cases, even for the same grade and for the same subject. So again, when we look at different schools, we're going to see different pieces of these elements in different classrooms. The piece I think that, one of the pieces I think that's kind of hardest for schools to really do in a serious way, schools are finding this requires a lot of time and effort, shared planning, shared learning, joint time for professional development is the diagnostic assessment and data use. The software that many schools are using provides data in a dashboard that teachers and sometimes parents can even look at. And the challenge is to understand how to use that data to then drive instruction, both for grouping and for topic selection and for the next piece, which is personalized student pathways, right? Allowing students to possibly move through units at different paces, to perhaps even skip units if they actually show that they already know them, and kind of how does that happen in a classroom, often with only one teacher, right? And those are very new models that teachers and heads of school and administrators have to all get used to as part of the change and the shift to blended learning. Right, that goes along with what's here for in terms of teacher role shifts, right? It might be that teachers are spending much more time in small groups or in guiding and checking data as opposed to frontal instruction up in front of a whole class. Okay, the last few, production and publication of student work. That's, I think, kind of a wonderful add-on that blended learning can allow for. We've seen many schools that are interested in this mode of learning because the kind of lower levels of blooms, the things that we're used to calling kind of drill and practice, can now be done on a computer. They don't need the teacher as much for that piece, and teachers can be involved in higher levels of learning, working on project-based learning, problem-based learning, things that relate to student work at higher levels, and allowing students and teachers to enjoy that piece of classroom instruction as opposed to just problem practice. And then I guess the last one is kind of important if there is a desire to shift a whole school towards this modality, and that's the part about school-wide planning and support. If this is just happening kind of in pockets around the school, as a beginning, we think that's wonderful. But really, in order to make whole school change, there has to be kind of a vision from above as to where this is going to go. There has to be time devoted to professional development and thinking about software selection, device selection. This takes a lot of time and work, and understanding of kind of what are the theoretical underpinnings of why schools might engage in this work. And so I will just say, I think AVI CHAI is continuing to think about how we might support more schools in this process. Again, we're happy with the work that's been done so far. We'll talk about digital J-learning in a minute or two, but in the bold schools as well, schools are really working hard. And the question is, how can we, as a field and as a foundation supporting the work, kind of scale that work in an effective way? It's our next piece of work to try to crack. And we're happy that in general we see interest from the field in these areas, and we hope to be engaging more schools in the future. I think the survey pointed out that over 2/3 of schools who are already offering blended learning in some form plan to continue to expand their offerings, and so we see that interest in the field, and we'd like to help support that. One thing we tried this past spring is we offered a course for both leaders and meaning heads of school as well as mid-level leadership at schools to kind of think and plan for this implementation. We perhaps have to do that again and think about how to move those schools into their next step of planning as well. So, okay. Great. So now understanding that we're looking at a very wide array of what blended learning can mean, we just want to go back to a little bit of the statistics that show the growth in this area. There's been, as I indicated before, there's been really rapid growth, we think, in this mode between 2012 and 2014. A comparison of the schools that responded to both surveys in 2012 and 14 shows that over 80% of the schools that had no online or blended learning of any method in 2012 acted on their plans to adopt some method of online and blended learning by 2014. This goes along with Santee Siskin's finding that among the 50 schools that have been involved in AVI CHAI supported initiatives, there's been a lot of forward progress, a lot of kind of shifting back and forth, some acceleration, sometimes a step back or two, but no one has chosen, none of the schools have really chosen to stop or even really to decrease their activity. And so we only see growth, as I mentioned before, and we're hoping that this will continue as we continue to measure into the future. So here, what you see before you is not just growth in the number of schools that are doing this work, but kind of penetration into the number in those schools themselves, looking at the number of students that participated in each school. In 2012, of the 23.4% of schools that had implemented some method of online learning, very few of their students were actually doing that work. Only 12% of 2012 schools, that's the last two bars on the chart, say that many or most of their students were participating in online and blended courses. So even that 23.4% was not kind of school-wide. And now when we look at the data from 2014, and you can find this chart in the report online, 40.8% of schools that responded say that whatever models they are using are in use for most to all of their students. So that's, of the 79% of schools that say they're doing this work, many are doing it across their grades, across subjects, really impacting, many or most of their students. Great. Okay. I mentioned digital J-learning a few times in the last 20 minutes or so. It's a project based at the Jewish Education Project that we've been supporting now for about 4 years. We were pleased to see that the participants, about 30 schools that have been involved in the network since its inception, proved to be early adopters of this work. That wasn't really a surprise. They've had some incentive to do that. They were schools that applied to join the network early on. But the data does show that 10% of the digital J-learning schools are offering online learning school-wide, compared to only 1% of non-participating schools. And these schools are also the schools that are doing kind of what we would call the most advanced forms of online learning. They're twice as likely to be implementing hybrid or flipped instruction in their classrooms, as opposed to kind of using online learning around the edges for research or for intermittent use. Okay. As well, schools that participated in other programs that have been out in the field so far, programs like the ISTE conference, programs like EduCon that has now been in a few communities, a similar program to digital J-learning that we supported at Torah Mesorah, where there were 12 schools involved in a cohort that was piloting this modality. Those schools also were recognized among early adopters of this work. We also saw that, the 79% points to the fact that there were schools outside of AVI CHAI's orbit of support that are also beginning this work as well. And I think that was also, for us, a wonderful thing to see and to learn about. That schools are really, lay leaders at schools, professionals at schools, understand the value of piloting this work, trying it out, and seeing where it takes them. So, okay. So now we're going to talk about some of the outcomes that have been reported on, perceived impact, we call them, because it's basically the work that researchers did to ask school leaders about what they see as benefits and impact. We do not yet have kind of third-party quantitative data on educational outcomes. We do hope we will have that in the near future. We have research going on in a few areas that we hope will produce that kind of look. Also, as more schools take on new standardized testing that can measure their growth over time, we're going to be able to tell you more about that. I think now we're looking at what schools self-report as benefits of this work. So the kind of, again, not surprisingly, but kind of the standout piece of what schools reported is differentiated instruction. Being able really to provide differentiated learning environments, meeting individual learning needs, stands out as one of the major benefits of this work. Some schools have been able to move students who used to be in either resource room or enrichment settings into regular classrooms. Small group instruction can allow for the inclusion of more students in a regular classroom. Students can just move at their own pace, as we've talked about before. Other benefits and impacts that the schools have mentioned, growth in academic achievement, again, not measured yet by an outsider, but schools are beginning to report that. They talk about high levels of student engagement. Again, not sort of, that's a hard thing to quantify, but teachers seem to like to, and people when they visit classrooms kind of talk about, how many students are on task. When you walk into a blended learning classroom, it's often very high because they're not just sitting and listening. They are active learners during many of the stations that they work through. Other benefits, opportunities to enhance course material via software, via online opportunities. Many textbooks now have online pieces to them. Schools are using all different kinds of materials to enhance the learning environment and even to expand course offerings. Right, being able to give, especially at a higher grade level, being able to offer courses that they may not have been able to offer prior to online learning becoming a viable option. New this year, as compared to the 2012 survey, is the understanding that online and blended learning can create kind of a school without walls, that students can be in classrooms with students from other day schools or even other non-day schools. And the reaching out that's available, that, whether it's, across the United States or whether it's to Israel, both in terms of teachers and in terms of students. Many of the programs, especially on the Judaics end, which we'll talk about in a bit, are using faculty from Israel. That all creates kind of a global school environment that many schools are finding appealing. So we'll just highlight one quote from a school leader, that kind of repeats what we've said before. Small schools in particular are sometimes finding that this is a valuable learning modality for them. Sometimes even thinking about putting grades together in one classroom, multi-grade classrooms, so that, which is not a challenge if they're grouped, not necessarily even by age, but by level. And so depending on what where the niche is for this type of learning in your school, it can play out very differently and have different impacts. Great. Okay, to flip for a second to challenges to the work, as opposed to benefits and impact. I think due to the fact that this field is moving so quickly, there of course are some challenges. And both the Siskin report and the Deeter report point to similar ones. So there are common concerns, some of which are provider and product quality. The field is growing and changing. On a regular basis. Schools are searching for exactly the right product that fits them, whether it's based on the data that they want to receive, whether it's based on customer service, responsiveness, whether it's based on, is the program adaptive, meaning a student can go through it on their own and the program adapts to the student, or whether a teacher can pick out the pieces of the software that they want the student to move through. As schools learn, in a way, they are becoming pickier customers. And so that's a good thing and a bad thing. It makes the challenge of finding the right product both an interesting and kind of challenging process. And what we've actually found, Leslie points to this in her report, is that one of the benefits of being in a private school setting, as opposed to in a district where things are mandated from above, is very often day schools will change what they're using midstream, not even necessarily waiting till the end of the year. If it's not working, let's change it and get better. And I think it's very important for schools that are at the beginning of this journey to understand that it's an iterative process. There's a lot of risk taking, a lot of what we call failing forward, and that's part of the work. So, okay, another challenge that schools report is technical capacity, right? As more schools widen the depth of what's going on in their school, so the amount of Wi-Fi, the amount of devices, the number even of plugs in the classroom are all, you need an increase in all of them. And that means, often that means construction work that has to be done. Costs at the beginning probably increase before they can ever be cost savings. And then lastly, the perhaps actually the one that most schools cited as a challenge is faculty professional development. Again, we've said before, this is a very new modality for many teachers. It calls for both an understanding of the change of practice, but also an understanding in kind of the theory behind it. Why do we want personalization? Why do we want data-driven instruction? That all takes teachers who are open to changing, but it also takes time for joint professional development and joint planning, which in our day schools is sometimes very difficult. And so I think in a way, because the field has moved so quickly, this has been a particular challenge for many schools. I think we view these challenges as positive challenges, hopefully challenges that the field can meet. This is another area that AVI CHAI knows it needs to think about as we move forward in this field. The reports actually call, in terms of recommendations, the reports call for thinking about increased professional development. Again, how we might do that in a smart, at-scale way is something that we have yet to crack, but we're thinking about it. Another piece of that work, I think, is getting schools to visit each other, to share what they're doing, to both in terms of practices, in terms of software providers. The more that we can learn from each other, the faster and easier this will go. We're hoping actually that our next group of reports that we publish will be case studies, so that we can kind of dig deeper into what the work looks like in different schools, and we hope that this will help schools in thinking about how to plan for it in their own schools. Okay, I would say kind of another challenge to this work right now is the beginning, the nascentness kind of the field in Judaic studies. I think that for many people, we want to be doing kind of the similar kind of work on the Judaic end as we're beginning to do in general studies. And in general studies, there is an array of software to choose from. The Jewish field obviously is still starting. We're pleased that there is quite a bit kind of out there to choose from already. If you don't know or recognize some of the logos on this page, you can ask us afterwards. You can get familiar with them yourselves. Some are projects that we support, some are not, but we're kind of happy that they're all starting. Some will be, for instance, Italam is just developing its its first grade curriculum that will be moving from CD to online, and hopefully, it will scale up to match its full not online curriculum. The Lookstein Virtual Academy has been going on now for a few semesters for middle school and high school students. Their courses are, we think, very good, and we don't even have a logo for it yet, but we're also launching the online Judaic Studies Consortium that's going to be done with the virtual high school based in Boston. That's a different model where schools will be sharing their Judaic Studies courses with each other. If any of those interest you, if you want to learn more about them, you can feel free to reach out to us afterwards. Okay, we want to switch over to the second piece of the work. I mentioned at the beginning that we really had two motivations in doing this work. One is educational, and the second is a cost savings piece. And I think what we learned from these reports is that it's still too early to demonstrate cost savings results. I think we want to talk about why a little bit and what some of the challenges are. I think we still believe that it is possible that these modalities will lead to cost savings. And we hope that the field will continue to watch with us as we try to learn more in the next few years about whether that's really so or not. So we'll talk about it from two perspectives. One are the new schools that we've been supporting, and then established schools as well. So the report talks about 3 new schools that we supported in its first 2 years. We've made grants to other schools as well, and as we publish case studies, you'll learn about them. We decided for the purposes of research to name the schools with pseudonyms. So in the report, they're called, the 3 that we speak about are Darom, Tzafon, and Mizrach. And I'll tell you a little bit about them and kind of what we've learned from them. Okay, Darom was a school that opened with the hope of having students from grade 7 through 12. It existed for about 3 years. It actually does not still exist today. It closed at the end of last year. It could not grow to the number of students that it needed to be sustainable at the tuition price that they had set. And all of these schools started out with the notion that they would charge tuition far below the other schools in their area. And did quite a bit of business planning, but also sometimes kind of set in their head what they thought their tuition had to be. And schools are learning kind of what that price point really is. For this particular school, what we're seeing is at a high school level, even at a middle school level, perhaps families are not yet ready to send their students to a new school with a new model without a proven track record. And so this school was not yet, was not able to grow to where it needed to be by the 4th year to stay open. We have another small high school that thankfully is still open, Mizrach. They are also struggling with enrollment. They have, after 3 years, somewhere between 15 to 20 students in grade 7 through 12. They are doing both, I should say. The school that closed as well, they're doing very interesting work from an educational perspective, not just in terms of blended learning, but a lot of STEM-based learning, project-based learning. Mizrach is an all-girls school, but again, they are having trouble kind of recruiting the masses that they need at the price point that they wish to test to be sustainable long-term. The one school that seems to actually be meeting its financial goals, at least for the first 2 years that we looked at it, is a school called Tzafon. They're a school that's K through 2. During the time of this research, They have grown relatively quickly to about 160 students, and they actually should, they're meeting their enrollment targets quite easily. I think the challenge for this school is that it's now ready to move to its next stage of existence, out of a rental into a building that they are buying. How that will affect their bottom line in terms of costs, remains to be seen. Again, as a school grows, will it need more administration that, than it originally planned for? Remains to be seen. These are things that we need to watch. Again, not kind of saying, that we think they will not be able to demonstrate cost savings, but it is too early to tell. Even in the school that's been successful, so to speak, it's only in its first 2 years of existence. It needs to really grow through middle school before we can say with confidence that the model, I think, has been realized. In terms of established schools, as we said earlier, most of the work now is still kind of around the edges, right? In that 79%, very few are working in this model in a very deep throughout the school way. And that kind of prevents us from being able to realize cost savings, right? If you do this in only one class or with a small group of students, obviously you're not going to see cost savings. So we can't really talk about established schools yet. These two research reports don't deal with the bold day schools, which are 5 schools that are involved in a project funded by AVI CHAI, the AVI Foundation, and the Affordable Jewish Education Project. Those schools are finishing their second year. We have separate research and data collection going on about them to try to look at what will happen when a school dives very deeply into the change to blended learning over a short period of time. Will they be able to realize cost savings? And so that data will be available, I would hope, in another year or so. But I think what we've also learned is that cost savings is kind of a tricky thing, that even if the model is working from an educational perspective, schools need to take an additional risk in order to demonstrate cost savings. They have to be ready to say, the model is working, and because of that, we are going to put more students into a classroom. We are going to no longer have 2 teachers in a classroom. We are going to cut down on resource room or enrichment services. And those are risky moves for a school to take, whether it's because of their own thoughts about the image that they want to present to their communities, whether it's what they think parent expectations are or what true parent expectations are. And so it's going to take additional advocacy work, understanding about if we want day school education to be more cost effective. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that the education has to suffer at all, but it may look different than what both educators and parents are used to seeing today, and that takes time. So I think, again, another piece of AVI CHAI's work is thinking about the messaging that schools need to do, the messaging that perhaps AVI CHAI needs to do to the field, and also understanding that this may not be a concern for every single school that's out there. It may not be a concern for every single parent that's out there. I think we believe it is a concern for enough schools and parents that we should continue to work in this area, to learn from the schools that are doing this work, and to be able, hopefully before we close at the end of 2019, to be able to say more about what we've learned to the field. Okay. So we've kind of talked about some of these before, but I want to just review them quickly. Some of our next steps, thinking about professional development for the field, both at individual schools and perhaps at scale, both for leaders and for faculty members. I think that, we're always interested in input from the field if people have ideas or thoughts that they'd like to share with us. Even in in your questions now, we're coming to the end. So if you have questions, you can write them in now or afterwards. A second thing that we are working on, the continued development of excellent Jewish studies programs, so that that number of schools that are using online, either blended or Judaic studies, will increase, and so that the quality will be good. We talked about that during the webinar. Italam, Neta, Lookstein, this new consortium. We hope that over the next year, those will only grow and get better. And lastly, I think we will continue to do research and to share that knowledge with the field, to talk about what is working and what is not working in online and blended learning in day schools. And to continue, hopefully, to do webinars like this. We're thrilled at how many people joined us for this time. Again, that indicates interest from all of you, which which we're very happy to see. I think what we want to pose to you, at least hypothetically, is for you as either educators in your schools, lay leaders, professionals at organizations, kind of what are your next steps in your institution? If you took that wheel that we looked at back at the beginning of the webinar, kind of where are you? If you actually colored in the wheel, right? Where are you? Where is your institution on that wheel? And how might you be able to color in different sections of that wheel, up to the top of that section? What do you need to get there? What do you need help with? Those are all things that we'd like you to think about, and hope that you'll share some of those thoughts with us as we continue our work together in the field. Okay, so we're going to see if there are any questions. Give us a minute. Okay, someone is asking about more specific information regarding curriculum that were used in blended learning settings. So what I can tell you is that there is a very large array, right? There are free products that are out there that schools are using. There are software that's bought. One thing that we are hoping to do, again, within, I think, the next year, is to try to do what we're imagining actually as our next level of survey work, is to try to do a deeper look at the 79% of schools that said they are engaged and try to map what people are using. There are, I can't really kind of list all the products that are out there, from Khan Academy to schools like K-12, to products for particular subjects like iReady. If people are interested, I can refer you to particular schools at your grade level that are working, and kind of make connections between you and schools that are already using this work. There are schools doing this in just about every subject and grade level that exists. Right, so the next person's asking about research about the effectiveness of blended learning. So what I will say is that there is already some research out there in the general ed world about this topic. Leslie Siskin mentioned some of it in her report. If this is something that you're interested in, you can be following particular kind of places online that are constantly putting out either new case studies or new reports. Places like EdSurge, places like the Christensen Institute, the Hessinger report, that are publishing on a regular basis studies about different work. And again, I can, offline, if people have questions, I think either, I can refer you on. Gary Hartstein at the Digital J Learning Network also will be able to refer you to particular research. Leslie's report, which again is on the Knowledge Center section of our website, points to some of those places already. But then there are places kind of to be watching all the time. So, okay. So yes, a cost question. With the added infrastructure and equipment that needs to be maintained, supported, replaced, and updated, isn't an increased cost expected? So yes, I mean, I think certainly at the beginning of this work, and depending on where your school is at already in terms of technology, there are additional costs to getting this going. I would say that we don't believe that to do this work, schools have to be one-to-one. You know, depending on the model that you're using, depending on the grade level that you're looking at. There are many schools doing this with a 3-to-1 device ratio, certainly with a 2-to-1 device ratio. But yes, there need to be extra devices because they do break. There are, you know, a percentage of devices that need to be replaced every year. But they can be balanced with other costs that we imagine decreasing. The need for possibly buying textbooks might decrease. The need for paper copying might decrease. The need for HR costs at some point might decrease. But yes, there are some costs up front. There might even be a need if you're doing serious professional development and teachers are putting in extra time to take on this modality. There might be a need to stipend them. We have seen that in certain schools, that schools felt that teachers need to be valued for the extra time that they are putting in to learn this. So yes, there are definitely costs at the beginning. We believe that over time, and none of the schools have been in it long enough for us to really tell you if our belief is correct or not, but we believe that over time, that will balance itself out. Okay, people are asking about the Jewish Studies Curriculum Collective, or the consortium that I spoke about. So you hopefully will be hearing more about this, you know, through your emails in the near future. It will be also a middle school, high school program. At the beginning, a few schools, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 schools, will be selected to develop courses with a teacher picked at each school. In the area of Jewish studies, courses that do not conflict with the Lookstein Center courses, so that we can kind of spread the wealth among different modes of online and blended learning. And then those courses will be available for other schools to take. So it means that a teacher from another Jewish day school will be teaching students in your school. As this grows, then a teacher in your school could be teaching some students in their own class, but in addition, kind of filling out a section with students in other schools. And so I can't really go into kind of the whole financial model of how this works. Again, as if schools are interested, they should let us know. We're VHS and their new project director hired for this project are beginning the recruitment of schools now. And so we'd love to hear from schools that are interested. This will be something that includes, you know, Schechter schools, Orthodox schools, Rav Sack pluralistic schools. We hope to be able to run the gamut and to be able to share courses across grades and subjects. Okay. Someone is asking, to what extent is the integration of blended or distance learning bringing about the adoption of constructivists or new pedagogies, such as PBL? So again, I think it depends on the school, and we haven't looked at this in any kind of systematic way. I think there are many schools that are interested in blended and online learning because it will complement new pedagogies, right? As I mentioned before, the time devoted to different pieces of the learning changes with this model, right? In a flipped classroom, there might be more direct instruction happening outside of class and then coming into class and being able to do more project-based learning. Even in a classroom where it's not flipped, but there is a block schedule and it allows for rotation within that time, if direct instruction is happening at the computer, then the teacher-led session can be about something else. Or a third station that's considered collaborative can be about students working together on a problem-based or project-based learning initiative. I think one thing that we have learned is that there are a lot of pieces to this work, and kind of you have to get down certain pieces of the work before you try to do everything. So if you're new at this, you want to get your model down first. You want to get your rotation down, or if it's about teachers rotating among the students, you want to get the teacher to feel comfortable doing that. You might even want to implement the model of rotation before you put kids onto the computer. And before you might be able to combine sort of all your goals of instruction, be it, you know, global learning, be it PBL, things like that. There are stages. They can't all come into play at once. If you're interested in the data-driven piece, that takes a lot of time and effort, and so you don't want to focus on PBL at the same time as you're trying to get teachers to learn about data-driven instruction. So we believe, at least at AVI CHAI, that they are definitely complementary, but they need to be smartly adapted with each other. Okay, next question. What is your working definition of an online or blended course? For example, an online course that is at least 90% online, a blended course that is 30 to 70% online. So the definition of blended that we have been working with, that I actually don't have in front of me to quote, is the one that the Christensen Institute is working with. It's a mix of face-to-face and online. It does not highlight at all what those percentages are. They can be different in different situations, but it is a mix of them. I think for us at AVI CHAI, the important part of the definition is that it is based on data-driven personalized instruction. You know, what we've seen really is that this can be kind of an add-on to what schools are doing, and that's very, you know, that can be wonderful. But I think if we really wanted to change the modality of instruction, the piece that we believe is kind of the strongest lever and the most exciting piece is really the part that allows for understanding what kids are succeeding in and what they're not, and then how we meet those needs. That's really the piece. But in terms of, you know, how much is online, how much is from the teacher, that's really a school by school and maybe even class by class decision. It depends also what you want to get out of the online piece. Do you want the online piece to only be assessment? Do you want the online piece to be instruction also? So those are all serious questions that schools need to undertake as they're thinking about the models that they wish to implement. Okay, next question. What are the technical support issues? Do we need a dedicated techie on site? So again, I think it depends kind of where you are on the spectrum of readiness to do this work. It definitely is helpful if someone understands the wireless issues, the software issues that can arise. We have found that as opposed to if a school had a choice between a techie and an educational technologist, I think we would probably focus them on the educational technologist part. The IT part might be able to be outsourced. Some schools are doing that to firms that help them understand how much infrastructure they need, where they need wireless connection points, etc. But the educational technology part and understanding the value of technology integrated into classrooms is very important, but it doesn't have to be a dedicated person either. Many schools are picking what they call blended learning leads and charging them with kind of leading this work, which requires a lot of learning on their parts, and might require them to be released from other tasks that they already have in the school. So again, it depends. Okay, I think this is going to be the last question, just looking at the time. At what age do we really want students to engage with a computer rather than human beings, and in what proportion? So I think that is a very important question that every school is going to answer differently. I also think that it's important to see this in action. If you went into the schools that are doing this in their kindergartens and first grade, it does not mean that the student is on the computer more than, you know, a half hour out of whatever time is their, you know, their secular studies education. Again, it depends on the model. It depends on what the desire in your school is. I think we all feel very strongly that teachers are a very important part of this picture. And it doesn't mean that when they're engaging with a computer, they're not engaging with a person. It just, there is a person in the room. There is a person looking at the data from their computer work. So I don't think it's necessarily a trade-off. It's what the right mix is and what it looks like in your particular school at different ages and at different grades. And again, there are schools that we can point you to, probably in whatever area that you are in, you know, that you could visit or talk to, you know, and gain more feel for what you think is right for your particular site. Okay, so we're nearing 2 o'clock. I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. I hope that a lot of you will be reaching out to either myself or to Deborah. Deborah sent you the email with the link, so you have her email already. Mine is very similar. It's rabrahams@avichaina.org. You can feel free to write to me directly. And we hope to be able to continue the conversation in individual ways. And then in the future as we publish new knowledge sharing reports. So thank you all again. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of the day.